boys and girls, grade 2 and grade 3. I hope you're having a good week so far. My week's going good, and I have another parable of the Lord Jesus ready to share with you. So do you remember what the word parable means? By now, maybe it's starting to stick a little bit in our minds, right? A parable were stories that Jesus told with messages about God's kingdom and how we should live. Today's parable is also about God's kingdom. So the people who the Lord has in his kingdom. And today's parable is called the marriage feast. It was a marriage. It was a feast from a wedding. And we can find it in two places in the Bible. In Luke 14, verses 15 to 24, and Matthew 22, verses 1 through 14. In this parable of the marriage feast, the Lord Jesus says, there was a king. The king's son was getting married, so the king had prepared a wonderful feast for his son. And he invited a lot of people to come to the wedding. On the wedding day, everything was ready. The king said to his servants, he said, why don't you go and get those people who were invited? Tell them the wedding feast is ready, they can come. So the servants, they go out to the houses and the homes of all the people who were invited to the wedding. Servant comes to one house, he says, you can come to the wedding. Everything's ready. The one person who was invited looked at the servant and he says, oh, you know what? I just bought a field and I have to go look at it to see if it's good. That's kind of strange. You'd think he would want to go look at the field before he bought it. He made an excuse. He didn't want to go. The servant thought, well, that's too bad. He doesn't want to come. So they went to someone else's house. This person said, oh, I would love to come, but you know what? I just bought 5 oxen. I have to go and try them out, see if they're good oxen. Which is also kind of a strange excuse because it's kind of like buying a car and not taking it for a practice drive, for a test drive before you buy it. So this person also made a strange excuse. He just didn't want to come. The servant thought, well, you know what? I'll just go to this other person's house. So he went to another person's house who was invited. That person said, oh, I just got married. I can't come. And so the servant goes around trying to get all the people who were invited to the wedding to come. But they all thought of excuses. None of them wanted to come. The servants, they went back to the king. They said, King, we asked them all to come, all the people you invited. But none of them wanted to come. This was their excuse and that was their excuse. The king was very angry. He says, I invited these people to a wonderful feast for my son. They don't want to come. So he said to the servant, why don't you go out into the street of the city? Go find people who are blind, people who are lame, people who are crippled, people who are poor. Invite all those people to my wedding feast. People who normally would not come to a feast of the king, right? Kind of people that don't have much money, who are very sick. The king said, invite these people to my feast. So the servant again goes out to the streets of the city and finds all this people that he could find. He says, come, come. The king is having a feast and you're invited. Now these people were very excited to come to a feast of the king. The king's son was getting married. So they follow the servants back to the palace of the king, to the king's house, and they sit down to have their feast. Now as they come into this king's house, there's people standing there offering them nice clothes to wear for the wedding feast. Special fancy clothes. They put them all on and they sit in chairs and they're all ready for the feast to start. But there's one person who also was invited to the feast, who came up from the streets, who was invited, who didn't want to wear a wedding garment. He thought, nah, I don't want to. So he just, in the clothes he came with, he went and sat down at the table. All the guests were ready. The king comes in just to have one last look, just to make sure to see who was all invited, how the guests were. As he comes in, he noticed there was one guest who wasn't wearing the wedding clothes, the clothes that all the guests were supposed to wear. So the king says to his servant, why is this man not wearing the garment, the special clothes, the wedding clothes? So he looks at that man. Why aren't you wearing those clothes? But the man couldn't answer him. So the king says to his servant, I want you to take this man, throw him out. He can't come to the feast. He didn't want to wear the wedding clothes. And that's where the parable ends. Makes us wonder, why did the Lord Jesus tell this parable? What does that have to do with God's kingdom? Well, what it means is that the Lord wants us to serve him, to do things for him. Just like this king wanted people to come to his wedding feast, the Lord is inviting us to do things for him. We can read the Bible, we can sing, we can do devotions, we can talk about God. We can do all these things for God. But if we think of an excuse to not read a devotion, or an excuse we don't feel like singing, or an excuse that we don't want to do something else for God, then we're just like those people who were invited to the wedding, but who didn't want to come, who made up silly excuses. So the Lord meant that we should do things for God. When God invites us to do things for him, we shouldn't think of excuses, because those are things that we can do for God. The Lord who made us, those are things we can do for God, who takes care of us, who makes sure we have enough food, that we have families who love us. We can do these things for God, to thank him for doing all the things he does for us, right? And especially when he wants to come and live in our hearts, right? We try to do these things. Now the people who refused to come to the wedding, right? Those are like people who made those excuses. So we need to make sure that we don't make excuses, right? That we ask God to make us want to do things for him. So that's our parable for today, the marriage feast. I'm going to take you to the table again, take you off the fridge. I had you sitting on the fridge again. And we are going to look at your activity for today. So again, like always, you have a lovely sheet. You're going to color it first. Easier to color it first, right? Now over here, let's look a second at the pictures we see here. So we see the king with all the delicious food on the table at the feast. And here we see the poor people who came later on to the wedding. The poor and the lame people. If you're lame, that means you can't walk very well, your legs don't work. So let's cut where it says cut. Neatly along the dotted lines. And I'm going to cut off the holes. Okay, well now I'm left with two pictures of people that you are going to cut out very neatly. The bottom one, there's a little tab and it says fold and glue. So you're not going to cut that tab off. Make sure that you keep that on, keep it attached to the people, because we'll need that for our pop-up page. Right, so these are the people who were invited to the wedding, the people who are willing to come to the king's feast. The people who weren't willing to come to the king's feast can also be compared to people today, right, who make excuses. And then what happens, just like the king, he said, well, then I don't want them to come to my wedding. So if we continue to make excuses as well, if we do that, then the Lord might also say, you know what, I'm not going to care about them anymore because they don't care about me, right? So we need to show that we care, also in the things that we can do for the Lord. All right, so I have this one cut out. Now it says fold and glue, so I'm just going to fold it for now. Just fold it along the dotted line. So now there's a little stand for these people here. We'll cut out the other people. There's a letter A beside it, which is a little handy because on your main page it tells you exactly where to glue the A people. Notice the clothes they're wearing, right? Those are not the kind of clothes that we wear today. These are the clothes that the Jews wore in the Bible times. They wore long robes with belts, sashes around their waists. Keep it closed. almost done. Neatly along the bottom here. Perfect. Okay. Now we need to make our pop-up tab over here. So we're going to fold it in half so that we can still see the picture right along the dotted line in the middle. And we cut out the tab where it says cut. Oh, we don't cut it out, we just cut along those lines. We'll open it and we'll fold it in so that the tab, can you see that? So that the tab is sticking in. And then we'll just kind of push on that so that the tab will stick out. And ta-da! Now when you do your gluing, you're going to glue the people where it said A, the people who do not have the tab. Oh, this is not very straight here. There. So we're going to glue them very nicely over here. And then the people where you glued that tab down, or where you folded that tab, you're going to glue where it says glue tab here. There we go. Now we have a nice pop-up page like this. You get the booklet with the finished parables in there so that you can see what it looks like when it's all done and colored. Let me know what color construction paper you would like for your cover here. So we have, let's look at this new parable from today. There we go. See? The marriage feast. Now I'm just going to carefully close it so you don't want to crumple anything up. And that's that. That's your parable for today. Tomorrow we'll get another one for you. And don't forget, boys and girls, on Sunday, it's Mother's Day. Now at school we'd make a craft, right? And do something nice for your moms. Maybe you can make something nice at home for your mom now. Color something, cut something, make a nice little craft for her, a card. Surprise your mom with a nice little card or a little something from you as well. All right. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you again tomorrow with another parable. Bye-bye.